Women have been sharing photos of themselves back when they were 14 years old, in an act of protest against Republican Senate candidate Roy Moore. Moore, now 70, faces accusations of sexual misconducts from 5 different women, who say they were teenagers when the politician acted inappropriately towards them. North Carolina lawyer Catherine R.L. Lawson started the hashtag #MeetForteen to show it's never acceptable for an adult to pursue a relationship with a child that age. Speaking out, North Carolina lawyer Catherine R.L. Lawson started the hashtag #MeetForteen in protest against Republican Senate candidate Roy Moore, accused of sexual misconduct. Innocence, anchor Katie Couric, 60, shared her picture too and pointed out her preoccupations at the time had nothing to do with pursuing relationships with grown men. Words: one person described her 14-year-old self as not old enough to drive. Not old enough to work without a permit. Not old enough to see an R-rated movie. Not old enough to consent. Can't consent at 14. Not in Alabama. Not anywhere, Lawson wrote. The legal age of consent in Alabama is 16 years old, as it was in 1979, when Moore's first accuser, Lee Korfman, says he imitated a sexual encounter with her, then a 14-year-old girl. But for Lawson, the matter goes beyond the legal notion of consent. I shared a picture of me at 14 to illustrate there is no acceptable version of this story. Teenagers can't consent to a relationship with a grown man, ever, she told the BBC. It's not a question about the legal age of consent, but about affirming a shared social value that children deserve our protection. Many women followed suit after Lawson, sharing photos of their teenage selves and pointing out how their preoccupations, at the time, had nothing to do with pursuing relationships with older men, and focused instead on the typical growing pains of adolescence. Actress Alyssa Milano, now 44, shared her own throwback photo, writing, "I worshipped my brother. I loved my dog, Poochie. I loved OMD. I had big hair. I was happy. I was innocent." Anchor Katie Couric, 60, shared her picture too and added, "I was eating a lot of chocolate chip cookie dough and learning to do the hustle and not worrying about a 32-year-old man trying to hustle me." Related articles previous. 1 Next. Roy Moore's lawyer tells Muslim MSNBC host his background. Roy Moore married a high school classmate of woman who. Share this article. Share script DM.Later, bundle, function, if, DM.Rotator, new DM.Rotator, P24, page size, 1, page count, 1.0, active class, active, rotate, false, $, number P24.Share.On, click, function, dms.facebook.post related. Past, actress Alyssa Milano, now 44, shared her own throwback photo, writing, "I worshipped my brother. I loved my dog, Poochie. I loved OMD. I had big hair. I was happy. I was innocent." Not prepared, many women pointed out they weren't equipped at the time to deal with advances from a 32-year-old man. Young, one person described herself as being barely 100 pounds when she was 14, with a face full of acne, pointing out she wasn't allowed to date an 18-year-old. Several women pointed out how innocent their lives remained at that age, with one of them writing, "I wasn't dating yet, I was playing mini-golf with my dad when this was taken." Another person described her 14-year-old self as not old enough to drive. Not old enough to work without a permit. Not old enough to see an R-rated movie. Not old enough to consent. A woman also shared a journal entry she wrote when she was 14, about crying at a dance because she was scared of dancing with boys. Not old enough to consent to a romantic relationship with an adult man, that woman added. Others shared heartbreaking stories of assault that happened when they were still girls. Alabama Republicans largely sided with Moore after the allegations against him surfaced, and Moore remains in the Senate race. Senior party members, however, have called on the conservative to withdraw from next month's election in Alabama. Women share photos of themselves aged 14. Moore's fifth accuser came forward on Monday, saying he assaulted her when she was a teenager. The politician, a former state Supreme Court judge and Christian evangelical running neck and neck with a Democrat in the race, denies any wrongdoing. But Beverly Young Nelson claimed the now 70-year-old Moore sexually assaulted her when she was a 16-year-old waitress and he was a county district attorney twice my age in around January 1978. Nelson, who is now a 55-year-old businesswoman in Alabama, told reporters in New York that Moore was a regular customer in the restaurant where she worked and was flirtatious, signing her high school yearbook during one shift in late 1977. A week or two later, Nelson said she was waiting for her boyfriend to drive her home after work, when Moore instead offered to give her a ride. But instead of turning onto the highway, he drove behind the restaurant to a dark and deserted spot. Mr. Moore reached over and began groping me, putting his hands on my breasts, she said, reading from a prepared statement alongside celebrity lawyer Gloria Allred, who has represented women who accused Bill Cosby and Harvey Weinstein of sexual assault. I tried fighting him off, while yelling at him to stop, but instead of stopping, he began squeezing my neck, attempting to force my head onto his crotch, she said. I was terrified. He was also trying to pull my shirt off. I thought that he was going to rape me. I was twisting and struggling and begging him to stop. I had tears running down my face, Nelson said. Allegations: Moore faces accusations of sexual misconduct from 5 different women. He remains in the Senate race. Nelson said she was motivated to speak out after 4 other women told the Washington Post that Moore also pursued them in their teens, while he was in his early 30s working as an assistant district attorney. Moore dismissed those allegations as a dangerous lie. Asked whether he remembered dating women in their teens when he was in his 30s, he replied, "Not generally, no." But on Monday, he faced mounting calls to quit. Even before Nelson spoke, the Senate's top Republican Mitch McConnell said he believed Moore's accusers and urged the anti-establishment conservative to step aside from the December 12 election. The number 2 Senate Republican, John Cornyn, withdrew his endorsement of Moore, calling the accusations disturbing and, if true, disqualifying. Cory Gardner, the senator in charge of the 2018 Senate election campaign for all Republicans, said if Moore refused to withdraw and were to be elected, the Senate should vote to expel him. Moore is locked in a tight race with Democrat Doug Jones in the contest to replace Jeff Sessions, now U.S. Attorney General, as Republicans seek to hold on to their slim 52-48 majority in the Senate. Nelson batted aside any suggestion that she was motivated by politics. "My husband and I supported Donald Trump for president," she said. "Mr. Moore attacked me when I was a child. I did nothing to deserve this sexual attack. I was frightened by his position and his power," she said. Allred left open the possibility that other accusers may come forward, refusing to comment when asked if other women had contacted her about Moore. The explosive Washington Post investigation that first brought claims against Moore to light saw one woman allege that Moore initiated a sexual encounter with her in 1979, when she was 14 years old and he was 32. 3 others said Moore pursued them when they were 18 or younger. White House officials have said that if the accusations are true, Moore should step aside, and McConnell has floated the possibility of getting a Republican to come forward as a write-in candidate in the race. Moore's controversial positions put him on the far right of the Republican Party.